I'm unbelievably appreciative of the work of what is happening to connect those around the globe, and a lot of this work that we've all come here to do. And I feel like a greater deal of my purpose is to encourage that really we need to start seeing all solutions at the table and working together and not against each other. And so, um, my name is Nick, and I have been working in restoration work and regenerative agriculture for some 21 years now. Um, I've worked in 15 different countries on 63 or so different land bases. I planted with my teams close to about 500,000 trees so far of over 300 different species. And a lot of times I come into the same space as to, uh, what tree to plant where, or where do I put my house, or where is it that we should put this one thing or that thing. And I feel like what is missing is the interconnective tissue that binds all life and seeing us all part of the sum of the whole. And so my background comes actually as I was also an emission specialist, a master tech diagnostic tech in automotive engineering, and really a lot of sensor inputs and outputs. I applied that to um, controlled environment agriculture and started developing my own grow systems, originally for cannabis. And then secondly, I ended up really focusing that on what if we put $4,000 a pound kind of attention towards food as opposed to cannabis, which was obviously bringing a much higher price than tomatoes at 40 cents a pound. And it's like, what if we actually like gave that kind of time, energy, attention, and resources to food security and water security? So I took a big jump and a leap off, and really focused on perennial agroforestry projects, either for fuel or food, and really focused at how that we can use technology as a bridge to actually get us there into a happier world. And I think in a lot of my line of work, regenerative scientists and regenerative agriculturalists and restoration specialists are often really against technology coming into the room. And for me, I feel like we're not going to do this without all solutions going. And I'd like to believe as some of these technologies to be kind of a planned non-necessitance. We've all heard of planned obsolescence, where technologies are built to throw away. But I'd like to believe that we build technologies to phase themselves out. And so right now, we cannot combat the rate at which the destruction is happening. We cannot combat the rate at which conventional and commercial agriculture is moving things on. We cannot feed the people with permaculture gardens, unfortunately, and I've installed probably more than most people I know. And I do believe if everybody were to go and grow whatever food they can, that would be amazing, but it will not meet our caloric needs as a whole for the planet. And when I look at some of what we're facing today, such as like, 60% of the world's calories come from just three things: planned non-necessitants. Thanks for the ask. I'll try and pay attention to those things. Planned non-necessitants. So 60% of the world's calories come from three things: corn, rice, and cereal grains, mostly wheat. And that is like, if you think of the bulk of the poor of the world, this is their flatbreads, this is tortillas, this is naan, this is chapatis, this is roti, this is all the flatbreads that is like the bulk of this. And if you get a little bit of rice, if you get a little bit of other meat, that's a lucky thing, but just a little bit of vegetables or legumes or pulses and a little bit of spice, that is like what the world globally eats. And they are all susceptible to the changing climates. And I just gave a talk to the University of International Cooperation um, to a bunch of entrepreneurs and business leaders that are looking to change the world. And I do this practice pretty much about once every year or two for a major talk. And I pull articles from all around the world that are showcasing what's happening live right now. And having done this kind of practice for about 15 years, this was the first time that it was everywhere all at once. In every single continent, I was reading live articles of drought. In every single continent, I was reading live articles of flooding. In every single continent, I was reading late frosts or early frosts. And all of these are susceptible to what is annual agriculture, which is what's feeding the world right now. And this is what lends me to really want to focus on changing our global narratives that have gone into, you know, these monocropping of ideas to food to just about everything. And um, I actually consult for a handful of carbon trading desks, MRV collectives, which stands for measurement, reporting, and verification. This is a common thing to get carbon to turn into credits. And so I'm at the very pulse of the carbon universe, and we have gone to way down a road that is not valuable to all of humanity. And this is because we have like a $500 billion market going into these kinds of worlds through technology of measuring this component that is not affecting the majority of the world. And I know you said this will be like a very challenging thing, but for some people, and unfortunately with 20 minutes, I won't be able to unpack it fully, but I recommend just checking into how we look at real greenhouse gases. And carbon dioxide really only accounts for about 3 to 4% of these greenhouse gases. And um, can I see by possibly there's only a handful of people in the room. Anybody by a raise of hand knows what counts for 70% of all greenhouse gases? Yeah, Alex, you want to go ahead and chime on?
Is it methane?
No, it's not. So 70% of all greenhouse gases. I'll give one more shot if you want to see a digital kind of
Is it
hand
water vapor?
raise. It is water vapor. Thank you so much for that. It's oftentimes that it's not actually answered. So I spoke at a climate summit in 2008 in the South Pacific region in Fiji, where I was working. I planted 80,000 trees, all organically of biofuels. And this is a Pongamian, not a highly oily resinous nut. And everybody's like, well, why does that matter? That's not that big of a deal. It was the first of its kind because in biofuels, we still use petrochemical fertilizers. We still use petrochemical pesticides because we think we're not eating it. So who cares what we're growing it with, obviously, right? But at this climate conference, this was in 2009, everybody was speaking to around 2030 to 2050. Sorry, 2050 was the number that was really relatively purported, that we should be experiencing a lot of the physical, hugely damaging effects. And I was the only non-scientist in the room that spoke to a lot of what we've been experiencing by 2030 was my estimates. And this was indicating some things like more fires in northern latitudes than southern latitudes. This was like 100-degree days in the Arctic circles. This was 20 plus hurricanes or 10 plus hurricanes in a season in the Caribbean regions. This was Amazon's burning. And a lot of things, this was kind of, I was like considered the person who was way off base by all these climate scientists and climatologists. Every single one of these things happened by 2020. And that doesn't make me feel good that I was off by 10 years and they were off by 30 years. What I want to say is that our climate modeling is off. Now, this does not mean that humans are not causing man-made destruction. It does not mean that we are not changing climate on both a micro and a macro level through change of land use. This is concrete. This is changing in grid and rid of forests. This is all the different ways that we are absolutely changing the way that sun hits the earth and bounces off the earth. But it kind of, when it's carbon dioxide, everybody's a culprit. You breathe, you drive a car, every single person is responsible. And we're all sitting here pointing fingers at the boogeyman when we're not actually giving it to the people that are destroying our rivers, creating dead zones in the oceans, removing forests at the speed of light. And so it's completely counterproductive when we're in this off and on. And that's kind of the point of it, is that we're all pitted against each other, believing whether or not this is the main focus. And when it's 4% of what is the main focus and it holds very little heat. And I know this because of controlled environment agriculture. I ran a handful of experiments. The greenhouse effect is like water vapor in the room. When you walk into the greenhouse, you're actually feeling the heat because of the amount of energy that's trapped in a droplet of water. That's why Florida at 80 degrees is like 100-fold more uncomfortable than San Diego at 80 degrees, which might feel cool. It's literally the moisture that's holding on to all of that heat. And so the climate modeling has been off for a long time because we also, for the longest time, have thrown out peak events. So when we have a huge deluge and a huge flooding, we actually throw that out of the climate modeling because it throws off our pretty little graphs that show perfect little trends. And when we have like major heat waves that are only 3 to 5 days, those don't show up on ice cores. When we pull an ice core, we're actually getting certain kinds of examples of like, within a 30 to 100-year range we're looking at. And that's like kind of a good trend, but we're not able to pull a year, let alone a month, let alone a week, let alone necessarily an exact date, because the way that those bubbles are frozen in kind of layers, it's kind of not an exact perfect sentence, because there's melting and freezing that's happening all the time that creates this kind of shift that's actually not creating really accurate ancient patterns and even existing patterns today. And so why I'm saying this as it comes to bridging technology and ecology, and I'm actually working with scientists at MIT, Stanford's new Door School of Sustainability, and some really brilliant and beautiful people. You might know Daniel Schmachtenberger, Tom Chi. And we're looking at actually creating a model that's looking at the cycles of both air currents and ocean currents and the movement of water. And the reason it's been thrown out is because it's been so difficult up until now to actually create a three-dimensional kind of capacity of modeling how water is moving. It's so complex, the hydrological cycle. If you think of the capillaries of trees and every single plant that changes with the movement of the moon, that changes with the movement of the sun, that you watch these solar panels that are the leaves of trees, and the plants actually like extend their tips to come and reach out to the light. All that is being filled with water that's like actually moving through the system. And when we think of like where fresh water went when we actually mismanagement, we like forgot about the 40 or 50 billion animals annually that we're slaughtering that are over 50% water. And by the way, I do animal husbandry as far as holistic grazing. So I'm definitely not somebody to talk shit on holistic grazing. Just care about where your meat comes from. Obviously, factory farming is some of the worst shit on the planet. And regenerative agriculture as it pertains to holistic grazing is some of the best. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for some better numbers. Oh, cool. My numbers may be off. 80 billion land animals. Beautiful. Thanks for the numbers on that. At 50% water, and less than 500 years ago, we were 1 billion people. We are now 8, and we're looking at all of us being 50% water. We starting to see where some of the trends of where our aquifers and where the take and where the movement of water has gone. And so the reason I'm speaking to this is like, it is so vital that we shift our narrative now to our focus of the hydrological cycle. All restoration work should be focused on riparian zones. I consult for the African Union in the largest tree project planting on Earth that's known as the Green Wall. Check it out. It's actually had a very terrible failure running this wall, trying to stop the advancement of the Sahara Desert. And the reason is because we have this in our minds. We can like create vertical lines and hold back advancing progression. And one of the things that is, I think, most vital along this lines is that if we I actually didn't get to see it.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No worries, easy as. I was just making sure it wasn't a question. I'm happy for anyone to plug whatever they'd like to throw out there. If we do not focus our restoration work on watersheds, these watersheds feed all biomes, all ecosystems. They feed all animals, all humans. And water is the key to microbiology. Micro is the key to macrobiology. Water in the system is so much different. When we're studying carbon, we're actually not even differentiating very often yet whether it's alive or dead carbon. And so we're just looking at biomass as a matter of a metric of volume and not even able to really determine accurate information because of levels of density. However, water is actually the real key point to seeing our connection to all life. And the more water that can be retained in soil through the life and the humus layers and the mycorrhizal fungi and all the pieces that are holding the glomalin, all the pieces that are holding the soil together, that's actually a really great indicator of whether there's going to be insects. That's a real great indicator that there's going to be macro biology running through and fauna running through and or birds running through and feeding into the diversity of these stages. And so where I see us really needing to focus in some of these ways is like moving towards a different narrative that affects all life. And some of the other kinds of examples, I could see us rapidly increasing the rate at which we can do some stuff. And I've got to apologize because I usually have this piece down pat, but I'm just leaving and hearing in the background my online baby shower as I'm bringing a daughter into this world. And so I'm slightly a little bit squirrel-like and a little bit all over the place. So I appreciate everyone bearing with me to that effect as I don't maintain a lateral train. And for all those that are keeping track and it still sounds interesting, bless you all to heck. Uh, and yeah, I was just broken down into tears a little bit ago because I think the more and more that you know, the more that you realize that we're on the other side of actually, in many ways, too late. And I have shifted my focus in the last 4 years from developing solutions, both technologically and ecologically, and kind of blending and melding different concepts and methodologies. I consider myself um, like a musical director or like a conductor. I didn't write the music, nor do I play the instruments, kind of thing, you know? And so they deserve really most of the credit. But it takes something to make a symphony out of all these beautiful sounds. And so that's kind of where my zone of genius comes in, is these all-inclusive stakeholder kind of groups. And a lot of these technologies that I speak about are not just like as we would think in regards to as we would just think about robots and AI and or other things, even though they have a huge amount of benefits. Like Tom has been working. Tom Chi is a partner and a friend of mine, and you should check out At One Ventures. He was one of the founders of Google X and amazing contributor to a lot of work in this day. But we're talking drones that plant, 1,500x what any human can do in a day. We're talking drones that are planting coral at around 200x what any human can do today. And so I'm not saying that I'm really excited about robots doing most of the work, but if we're able to spread seeds on hillsides that are eroded, that are very challenging to get to, and we're having reasonable successes, more than in many cases that we're having with the human-led planting efforts, I'm happy to see all solutions transition us towards a better way because we don't have the humans on the ground moving to get the work done. And I'm in regenerative agriculture. A lot of times, a lot of people don't understand. It's like, hey, do we really want robots in our food work? And I don't know. I work for the poorest and the richest people in the world. And I say that almost simultaneously because the richest are the ones who can afford to do the crazy shit. And the poorest are unfortunately the people that are tending these lands globally. So every single country that I've worked in, it's the next poorest country over that's tending that food. So when I was in Thailand, it's Burmese or Cambodians that are a lot of times filling these fields. When I'm in Mexico, sometimes it's Guatemalans. When I'm in Costa Rica, it's Nicaraguans. When I'm in Colombia, it's Venezuelans. When I'm in US, it's Mexicans. And so like, if you're thinking, it's like they find ways to underpay these people, and they're often the least paid people in every single groups of the economy. And this energetic exchange is often met with also the lowest life expectancy, both with agrochemicals, but both a lot of our lifelong health is dictated to our spinal columns and our spinal health. And it's back-breaking work, literally. Bending over and planting seeds or pulling weeds is literally back-breaking, and it's why they're connected to the lowest life expectancy. So I'm not saying replace these humans. However, some of the work that I've been doing with drone monitoring of a field is able to spot disease or predation or any kind of thing way faster than I can. When I'm traveling through fields that are hundreds of acres, even dozens of acres, or thousands of acres, you don't see the problem until it's proliferated too far. Now with AI and being able to like take a look at these things, the first plant that gets affected to these things, we can go and isolate that plant, pull the plant out, and now we've quarantined whatever pest or whatever disease is there long before we need to use the pesticides or the herbicides or whatever the case. And the mechanical removal and or salt kind of spraying that I'm seeing in the technological realms of being able to isolate weeds and the kind of like the competing foliage that's robbing the nitrogen from the soils without needing herbicides, that's a huge thing. Like we should be celebrating the shit out of that, because otherwise if we were to try and have that same effect with humans, we would have 100 more people being abused in a field trying to pull these pieces out, and then your tomatoes would be $5 a pound, you know? And so where I think we're like missing a lot of the spaces is embracing some of these technologies into realizing that if they could transition us towards a regenerative agricultural future, we can actually lean on some of these pieces to actually do better for us. So I was like into matching satellites MRV, and that's like monitoring, reporting, and verification. That's like biodiversity and carbon. And so thinking about my biggest concerns as well is like worrying about securitizing more of nature. So I do not believe we need water credits. I do not believe we need biodiversity credits. We need new places and ways to participate. And so I'm appreciating that. I'd love to have a conversation at depth with you. Um, Thank you so much. Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces there. I'd love to make sure that there's time for a couple of questions. And I'd be happy to answer them. And then I'm going to read something that's pretty dear to my heart. Do we have that time?
We have 7 minutes.
Okay, cool. So anybody want to raise a hand to grab a question? I'm sorry again, like I said, my distraction today is at the highest for all beautiful reasons.
Yes. No worries, no worries. I put my question in the chat. So you told a big story. Yeah, you can maybe repeat it as well.
Oh, that's fair. The 70% of greenhouse gases with water vapor, what I'm saying is that when we're applying to greenhouse gases, and he is Alan, if that is what the alien name says, is referring to like the amount of time that they remain, and obviously water vapor shifts drastically on a daily and weekly basis. And the life cycle of some of these greenhouse gases like methane is arguably one of the worst things that we could be experiencing in this space. And so it is not saying that we are not to pay attention to the pollutants and the particulates and, you know, removing off of fossil fuels and those things. But I'd pay attention. There's a really great talk that speaks about our global energy crisis, that we cannot shift to renewables at this end. And it's with Daniel Schmachtenberger and Nate Hagens. Check it out. And there's a really great, interesting conversation that speaks about, one, the issues with energy density, two, the rare earth metals that are harvested around the world. Do we shift to cobalt and lithium at the hands of children mining and the destruction of other biomes in replacing of the other one? The key is reducing of consumption, not just finding ways that we can feel better. We just ran into silicon shortages in the last year. I'm in a lot of supply chains for renewable energy. Neodymium is a thing that should be looked at in as far as like a renewable energy transfer of part of the magnets that are dealing with solar wind turbines or electrification of vehicles, even with LFP and lithium ferrophosphate, which is like a way better bet, we are still like running at the space that we cannot supply this transition at the rate at which we're going. And so we will need fossil fuels. Everybody who says that we're going to go to 100% renewable is not really aware of what we can produce on a whole planet. And it is like unequivocally just not possible. And so, and I think there's smarter people than me that'll actually really give those kinds of basis. That's why I gave like a reference to a great talk that'll go down into that world. The other thing that I was kind of mentioning, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then links. Yes, I could definitely do that. The other thing I wanted to like speak to in regards to was kind of I've been inside this greenhouse. I started to tell this story and kind of moved off of it. And I've ran temperatures up in a greenhouse, and I had no plants in the system. And then I had plants in the system, and the water and the plants in the system drastically changed and actually cooled the room. And this is kind of a microcosm of the macro. I also then ran a scuba tank, and I took carbon dioxide levels, because we run a lot of carbon dioxide because the stomata on the leaves open and they can withstand higher temperatures. So arguably, I believe, and this is very controversial, and I've never shared this on a talk before, I believe we actually arguably might even be helped by the extra CO2 that's in the air right now to withstand the changing climate change that we are experiencing right now, because vegetation withstands higher temperatures. So that is like definitely a place that would probably need some other things. But if you look up carbon dioxide effects on the stomata of leaves, you'll understand that I run 20% less cooling into my growing environments, which is also the same as what we'd expect. I actually think in a changing climate, we might manifold literally small filaments of CO2 and allow CO2 gases to help annuals survive what we're experiencing today.
Thank you so much, Nick. So much information.
I'm going to read one more thing.
We really need to finish. Yeah. So how can we contact you?
I'll put this in here, and I'm going to read one more thing. It's going to be 1 minute. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you. This is for my unborn daughter. And this is called Water Woman that I wrote this. Too long we've neglected the waters and the women of this world. Old songs we've collected, sung by our daughters, flowers yet unfurled. New prayers we've course corrected, directives for deep remembrance. Intentions not forced, but respected, respective of more reaped deliverance. We are all at the mercy and fates of our ignorance and our mistakes, and I'm inheriting some of the shame while wearing the blame, preaching something different while it's all still the same. The oppression, the bigotry, the repression, the idolatry, transition to solidarity. We are the waters, as what is in you is what makes them and me. We are the rains, for as it falls, kisses the earth, the sown seed. It feeds the mountains by crystalline mandalas that melt to the sea. It fills the holy aquifers that replenish each and every living being. The lands have been in hands of man since before time was measured in sand. Bought and sold, fought for and stole, extracted and used, taxed and abused. Would a mother have sold our future down the drain for profit and quick gain? Would she have depleted our water, soil, and quality of air? Could she have retreated and sought for peace or fought fair? Death, debt, and destruction is not what any mother would choose. Instead, men have been playing a game with all life that we all lose. The time is now, building upon new principles, designs for wealth. All pine for hearts filled, a new dawn, sensible we choose happiness and health. We're marching forth together this mission clear and strong, to assume accountability and admit when we are wrong. We stand for the waters, the bringer of life to all that lives, home for many. Mother Earth remembers, and she also forgives.